Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, or whatever time zone it is, whether you in the world, it is your Lord and Saviour, and what the bloody hell are we doing trailer reactions? Well, here is some context. Throughout October 2023, World of Darkness HQ in Stockholm have been doing their Wadtober event, World of Darkness, where every day of the month they have a different theme, which is a word, and the fans go and create something, whether it's a bit of story, artwork, whatever, that's inspired by that particular word of the day. But also, every single day this month, World of Darkness HQ have teased something where it's a bit of tabletop role-playing games. For example, we've got the 5th edition Corebook on that hexagonal table at the back. For example, some video game stuff. And on the 31st of October, Halloween, World of Darkness HQ apparently is scaring the shit out of people with this trailer interview sort of thing regarding Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, a narrative and RPG stream, to use the title. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I wasn't actually going to cover any Bloodlines 2 stuff. I've kept my thoughts and reservations to oneself because it's very unlikely I'm going to play, not because I have any grief reasons for it, but purely because I don't have the equipment, i.e. the PC or consoles, to play it. But I wasn't going to do this because it's just something that I don't usually do, these sort of trailer reactions. But members of my Discord server, the Law by Night Discord server, which you'll find a link for in the description below, were talking about how pissed off and wound up the official Bloodlines 2 Discord server was, and I've seen some other people mention it, things that have really upset them as well. And on top of that, my partner was watching that earlier on as I was preparing dinner, and from the bits that they were sharing, I am a little concerned. So, I'm not going to go in this without any sort of bias or expectations. I'm just going to watch this as is, and just give my reactions to it as I watch it. Again, I don't usually do these trailer reactions, I don't know sort of the layout and things. I don't even know how successful this is going to be in, because the audio for this is very quiet, and there's very little I can do about that. I can do my best to boost it in the editing stage, but I'll do what I can, and I also don't know how big my face should be with this, because I don't know how much of gameplay they're going to be showing, so if I feel the need to move myself around, like so, whee, then I will do so. Otherwise, we're just going to sit right here on the bottom left corner, and just watch this unfold, and hopefully this won't be too much of a train wreck. But knowing Paradox and World of Darkness, I have my doubts. But I said, I don't want to be too negative about this just yet. So without further ado, let's go. Oh, one more thing. I may have ads pop up in this, and if that's the case, I'm going to be cutting those out. So if bits of this look a bit disjointed all of a sudden, like partway through speech, and I'm not saying anything, you know why, because I've cut out the advert, and I do not want that appearing on this trailer reaction. So anyway, without further ado, let's get on with it.
Good evening, Kindred, and welcome to this Halloween special, where we are going to give you what you want. You will get
I doubt that
Bloodlines
very
sneak
much.
Previews. We will talk about character. We will talk about narrative. We will talk to the Chinese Room.
Hello folks, I'm Ian. I'm narrative director at the Chinese Room. I've been in video games for about 30 years, and film and TV, spending a lot of time around detective stories and horror. In particular, you might have played Amnesia Rebirth, which I was story lead for. But tonight we're going to be talking about something a bit different. We're going to be...
I like the Amnesia series, but Rebirth was one that a lot of people didn't like, so this is going off to a fantastic start. But the fact there's somebody involved who's done a lot of horror stuff, and the Chinese Room have done Amnesia before with The Machine for Pigs, so that's a fairly confident start, I guess, he says, on a rocky bridge.
Looking slightly into the future.
And I'm Sean Graney, Executive Vice President for World of Darkness at Paradox Interactive. I've been with this project since 2017. I've been working with all of our World of Darkness projects, and I got into Vampire the Masquerade at a very uncomfortably early age, and it's been with me since then.
Yeah, I spent most of the early 90s with Vampire 1st and 2nd edition, and I still have scars.
So, why don't we get to what the people want? And take
Alright, that jump wasn't to do with me, then that was just, okay, we're just going to carry on then. It's interesting to note first of all, the time that this has been development, like 2017, it's not far off 10 years at this point, which is kind of a weird thing to think about. Also, talking about the other guy whose name I've already forgotten, the person from the Chinese room, spent the first and second edition, might explain some of the more action-orientated stuff, but from the previous trailers, I mean, but...
Character.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to look at a short video now, and we're going to step into the future in 2024, around about Christmas, to the Glacier Hotel in Seattle, and watch our lead character meet somebody.
Ooh.
So then, you have me at a disadvantage. I assume, of course, that you know who I am? So the question is, who are you?
You can call me Fire. I seek an audience with the Prince of Seattle. I've been led to believe you can help.
How delicious! Whatever could you possibly want with our beloved prince?
Okay, so this looks remarkably different from the original footage. I know they're vampires and all, but there is just no expression on their faces whatsoever. Of course, this game's coming out in a year from now, so obviously this is like alpha footage or whatnot. Oh, hold on, that actually says footage. What does that say? Post-alpha footage. Okay, so still a lot of development that needs to be done, obviously. There's also a huge difference in the voice acting. Like, Lou's got a lot of animation going on with her voice. Oh, how delightful! And then Fire, the player character has a name, so we can't. Already, this is already explaining that we're not going to be able to customize the character all that much. So, I know it's moved from different studios, but okay, I'm not too pleased with that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that direction for sure. I mean, but when I immediately think of Cyberpunk 2077, where it was advertised there was a lot more role-playing involved, and then it was more like an action-orientated thing, which is kind of the direction that it looks in. So that character from Cyberpunk is V. We've now got Fire, which is a very particular way of spelling this Eastern European vampire name.
That is not a fair exchange. You came to me, after all. Do try and play along, darling. It's so boring otherwise. Let's try again. Who are you, really?
What's with the
Someone
eyes?
who awoken from 100-year sleep, covered in thin blood vitae, with this mark on my hand, and no explanation why. I want answers.
Well, if that's all you wanted, why didn't you just say?
So that's it? You'll help?
And now what you've seen is truly a sneak peek. We are post-alpha, but this is game development. So certain sections may change. Certain sections may remain exactly the same.
I would hope that... what's with the eyes? Like, just constantly look up and just a bit dazed and out of it. Okay, sure, clearly the vampires are woken from 100 years of torpor, covered in thin blood vitae. How do you... Right. Okay. There's some choices, that's for sure.
Who did we just meet?
So we met two people there. We met the person who we were talking to there is a character called Lou, who, if anybody knows anything about Seattle, they may be able to figure out who that is. Our protagonist, one version of our protagonist you saw there, is a character we call Fire. Fire is an elder kindred. Fire has been asleep for around 100 years and has just woken up into modern day, or slightly near future, Seattle. And there are huge consequences to dropping an elder into a kindred city. Most games, we play a newbie. In all sorts of different RPGs, we play a newbie who is learning the ropes of the world. Fire is different. Fire is old, experienced. She's a hunter, she's a stalker. She knows how to be a vampire, but she doesn't know the current day situation and how her actions are going to affect the world.
So you're talking about how we're inverting the kind of RPG journey here. How is the Chinese room handling that from a game development and design perspective?
Yeah, there's a couple of really interesting things going on here. So firstly, It's the normal journey of an RPG character to gain power over time, but we're starting with a certain level of power here. You have impact from the very beginning. Fire isn't at her full power, hasn't recovered it yet, and there are constraints that we don't want to spoil that means she is effectively bound. She's in a bad situation. You may have seen that mark on her hand. That is a puzzle for her, it's a problem for her, it's something she's trying to solve. So the player journey, the character journey, is a...
So my immediate thought with that being an elder, she's probably an old elder, and I'm assuming that mark is either like limiting the power one way or another, and depending on how far they want to go with the V5 meta plot, maybe a crux to being summoned away via the beckoning, but who gives a fuck about the beckoning? It's not going to be that. But that mark and this Finnblood Vitae I somehow feel going to be connected in some way, which it seems weird to me, the whole idea of the Finnblood connecting with the Elder in this sense. I'm getting the impression that the Finnblood is... your character, the Elder, is bound to the Finnblood in some way. Hence why the Elder character was able to work out that it was Finnblood. I'm guessing that there's some sort of interaction that we haven't seen yet. But that's a weird fucking choice. If that is, of course, assuming that I'm correct with that, but maybe you'll explain that in a moment.
About regaining and possibly exceeding what she once was, and having making a big change to Seattle for reasons which I hope will become clear.
So this is the inverse
interesting
of
artwork.
Bloodlines 1 in some ways. In Bloodlines 1, you awake as a fairly unimportant vampire. You are used as a pawn by a number of different LA vampires. Here we'll be awaking as an elder in Seattle, trying to get their bearings, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's right. So this isn't a blank slate of a character, it's worth saying. Obviously, you can customize it. There'll be a choice of clans, there'll be a choice of outfits, a choice of gender. And as the gameplay goes through, it's up to you. Elements of her background are up to you to choose, and what she reveals to other people. And what story she's telling, whether she's telling them a fantasy or whether she's telling them the truth. But there's a certain commonality, which is she stepped into a place she doesn't know and she can't grasp yet. At a time she doesn't know and can grasp. So, like the protagonist of Bloodlines 1, she will have to learn what the situation is, who the major personalities are, and how she can deal with them.
But how does this not all come apart?
Alright, let's just pause that there, because the artwork looks alright. I like this potential design of it. Obviously, you've got red because vampires, the nice blues and whatnot. It's nice they're being diverse with the genders. At least that's the impression I'm getting. What text do we have here? Just going to move my face out of the way. In-engine render fire as female. Okay. But again, just the eyes look a bit weird. It's got a very light on upstairs, but nobody's in sort of thing. It's just a tad derpy. But it looks cool. It looks alright. I'm not going to judge that too much. Of course, post-alpha, so things will probably improve and change as we go on. But
opens a laptop or sees a pedestrian crossing.
She doesn't understand the modern world, but as you may have seen in that last video, she's not entirely alone. The Mark has done something very strange to her. She doesn't understand it at the start of the game, but she is hearing another voice. It is the voice of a character called Fabian. Fabian is a modern thin-blood vampire from Seattle. He has ended up inside fire in a way that will be explained in the gameplay. And he
what the fuck?
is trapped inside her. She is trapped with him.
What the fuck? Okay. What? Finnblood is trapped inside the Elder. That's some reverse diablerie shit going on. Maybe... Okay, first of all, that's really stupid. They had the Finnblood idea where the original inception of this, which I forgot to explain at the beginning, Hardsuit Labs were developing this at the beginning, you may remember this, and the idea was that you started as a Finnblood, and then you became the vampire proper. But here we seem to have the reverse, that you are a vampire proper with the Finnblood in you. And part of me thinks that if they're clever, this may be a case of, oh, you are the Finnblood, and you diablerized the Elder, and your memories are fucking scrambled. And that's like, that'll be like revealed. And again, this is just hypothesizing. If they were clever with this, that's the direction I feel this could go. That's what I would have done in such a scenario. But but if they... So initially that's done, but I'm trying to make sense of it. Rightly or wrongly, but that is so weird.
The two together have to navigate their way through this world. They may hate each other, they may grow to like each other, they may carry on hating each other all the way through, but they are bound together. He has an idea about how modern kindred work. He doesn't have the experience that Fire does of vampire society, but he's got a pretty good view, so he can help her, he can guide her through Seattle. He can also, because he is a Finnblood, he has access to things and an understanding of things that the Elder Vampire doesn't. So really this is the story of the two of them and how they...
The wording of that makes me think powers. That this individual has access to Finnblood alchemy. Because we saw with the first trailer this from the Chinese room, with all like the fucking Jojoro punching stuff going on, and the like blood sorcery stuff. That's my initial thought with that, which probably aligns more with the theory that I just presented, that this could be a Finnblood who has just had the big old suck, rather than... This is sounding more like Cyberpunk 2077, because, you know, you've got Johnny Silverhand inside you, who's like talking about this, that and the other, and the two characters either love or hate each other towards the end of it, and that's kind of what we got here. I can also see this very quickly becoming what a lot of games are doing, where you have the companion who's like really chatty or annoying, which a lot of people, well, find annoying. For me, personally, that can go either way, just depends on the writing, but that's such a weird setup. Like, I could understand if it was a Finnblood diabolizing an Elder, like, as a premise. That would be a lot more interesting to me. Like, because I think of, like, Monty Coven and Mithras sort of scenario, where it's reversed, where the Elder Vampire has all the knowledge of how things work, and you as the Finnblood are, like, just trying to fit in. I mean, this could be like a double flip sort of thing, but of course, with his wording, it could just mean how technology works, how society works, which kind of nullifies some of the aspect of like discovering things in game, I guess. But I guess we'll have to find out. I guess maybe we'll explain a bit more. Maybe we'll see a bit more footage.
Navigate their way through this situation and how they affect Seattle.
Will there be an ongoing
It's the dead
evolution
eyes, man.
in our relationships with these characters, and can we affect that?
Yeah, absolutely. Really, that's the meat of the game for Fire, is that she is having to deal with a society of kindred, and she has to decide how to deal with them, because they all have different objectives, different goals, and a different relationship to Fire. It's unlike the sort of game where you might play a Paragon or a Renegade, or a light side or dark side, because Fire has to look at each person individually and figure out how to work with them, how to deal with them. Whether she goes, I am an elder, you have to do what I say.
Just the choice of his words like Paragon and Renegade, those are some Mass Effect terms there. I know it's not supposed to be like that, but that Mass Effect mindset has probably gone into this somehow. So obviously this is leading up, there's going to be different endings. And I suspect one of them's going to be the good ending, the bad ending, and of course, the true ending, the canonical ending, and so on and so forth.
Whether she tries to court them, whether she is more insightful about what's going on. All those relationships will be different, and people will treat her differently because she treats them differently. And then the core feature of all this will be the relationship between her and Fabian. The two are caught together. Fire is the only person who can hear Fabian. Fabian can't interact with anybody else. He sees everything that she does, and he sees how she treats other people. So that long-term relationship really is the heart of this story.
And for fans of Bloodlines 1 and Vampire the Masquerade?
So, He's going to be the... I am assuming, because of the Vim blood and the relationship thing, he's going to be the more moral compass, because he's more tied to the humanity. The elder vampire isn't so much. So I imagine there's going to be some sort of morality system in place, or in the sense that he's talking about other relationships with characters again. I'm thinking Mass Effect. Maybe not necessarily to the point where you can, like, smash them all the way. I don't know, maybe they will. But relationships, good, bad. I feel there's going to be a lot of different factors here that's going to contribute towards one of these endings. Well, with many endings I'm presuming this is leading to. Yeah. This could go one of two ways. I'm hoping that it will be really nicely done, but the setup is just so bizarre to me. I'm trying to get my head around that still.
As a franchise, what will Fabian offer as far as
okay, here we go.
feeding back that kind of information to the player?
Well, the two talk through the whole game, and then as the story develops, the effects that she has and the effects that Fabian has on her. Really, she's an elder vampire. She spent a lot of time not really thinking about humans as anything other than prey, really. She's distanced from that. In the same way that we as players are often quite distanced from violence in games and from the strange in games. Fabian is much more grounded. He's much more human. And really, we're playing off the contrast between the two, the contrast between the elder and the younger, the contrast between the olden times and the new times and how the two interact. So he's very much an anchor for her, I think it's fair to say, and very much a compass for her if she chooses to pay attention.
Yep.
And so for fans of the IP and also the original game, Fabian will sort of play this role of explaining to the character how humane they are.
I guess that's part of it. Yeah, Fabian's got many roles. He's a very rounded character. It's also worth bearing in mind that it's not just going to be fans of the franchise who play this game. So new players are going to want to learn about the world. Fabian knows about some of it. Fire knows about a lot more of it. But the way the two talk about it and the way the two discuss it will help us open that window into a world and tutorialize it to a certain extent, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. As I mentioned with the action earlier on, the action stuff is obviously to pull in the normies, because traditional vampire fans, they saw that like myself and thought, this doesn't feel very vampire to me, but of course that's going to try and entice more people into that. But at the same time, it's not what Vampire the Masquerade is about. Because even people who played Bloodlines 1, who have like next to no interest in the tabletop game, I've heard with some people who saw that and thought, this doesn't feel like Bloodlines to me. This feels like something totally different. And especially the way that this works. The way that they've decided to do this with the voice in your head sort of thing, rather than a reoccurring character that pops out, or if they wanted to do the Fimbler, they could have been... It could have been set up in the sense of a life boon. To be really cheeky about it, if assuming the Fimbler would know about that. Or it could have been something as casual as, well, I've just saved your life, you fucking owe me one, otherwise I'll come and hunt you down. You know, something really casual like that. Or it could have been unveiled some horrible secret or whatever. Now the Fimbler is helping them out in that sense, like a forced relationship like that, rather than the voice in the head, which I feel is a bit more inconvenient. Sorry, a bit more convenient, I should say. So, it's a double-edged sword, really. Yes, I can understand the thought processes of them doing this, but at the same time, the fact it's a Finnblood, and they couldn't have made a fledgling vampire. I don't know, man. I just think the whole thing's a bit weird.
And also how the powers work and how powers interact with other characters in the world. That somebody needs to know that stuff, and some players won't. And so the interplay between the two characters helps us.
So Fabian sounds like a very interesting character. How will players be able to customize their narrative experience with Fire as the protagonist? So,
as we talked about earlier, you have options. You have clan choices that affects, for example, the powers that you have. Although, again, the story gives us a bit more opportunity to play around with that. It's a bit more flexible because of the presence of things like Finnbloods. There's the activity.
Okay, so that kind of does feel to me that Fire does have some access to thin blood alchemy. That's my impression from what he just said. If I just go to that and just rewind that a little bit, I might have gone a bit too much there.
So, as we talked about earlier, you have options. You have clan choices that affects, for example, the powers that you have. Although, again, the story gives us a bit more opportunity to play around with that. It's a bit more flexible because of the presence of things like thin bloods. There's the interaction.
Yeah, that bit to me feels that because of the whole Fabian and her mind thing, and possibly the sigil on her hand, and all the tattoos on the artwork and whatnot, and on her wrist and whatnot, does imply to me that she has a bit more understanding of thin blood alchemy and thaumaturgy or blood sorcery in that regards. And of course, her being an elder, I'm assuming there's going to be a bit more customization or an opportunity for you to learn additional disciplines, or maybe they'll give you that option. I don't know. That'd be interesting if they gave you a clan and because you were an elder, you had access to a couple more. Elders traditionally do have like one or two outside of their free. But to me, this spells out to be the fact that we're going to have access to some form of thin blood alchemy and blood sorcery, regardless of a clan. So, to that end, I would be surprised if the Tremere were a playable clan option because of that connection. Maybe it's a bit difficult to say, but I don't know. Maybe he'll say what they are in just a moment.
Activity with all the characters you talk to, the choices you make with those characters. And then there's the wider city, Seattle.
Okay, so again, just a little bit there, talking to the different characters. Maybe they'll teach you some disciplines, like Beckett can teach you Protean in Bloodlines 1. If you have, I can't remember, I think it's knowledge or whatever, like it's up a certain amount. And if you have Protean, he'll teach you celerity. Maybe it's that sort of thing like that. Maybe that Nosferatu Tolly, or whatever his name is, maybe he'll teach you Obfuscate or Animalism or something like that. Maybe with Lou What's-Her-Face, her being a Toreador, she might be able to teach you Presence. Like, something like that, maybe. I think that's what's implied here, but time will tell.
Seattle itself, and how Fire deals with the citizens of Seattle. And as a predator, there are times when she is going to want to gain power from some of the citizens, and hunt. And this will affect how Fire's powers can change as the game changes. And that depends on how she treats those citizens. If she approaches them as a...
I don't like that. I get Infamous vibes with this. If you don't know, Infamous was that superhero game for the PlayStation 3, where you had those electric powers, and depending if you're good or bad, your hero or your Infamous, your electric powers had different effects, similar with Infamous Second Son. Your different powers, depending if you're good or bad, they had same powers but different effects. That's kind of the impression I'm getting here, so which is, to me, reinforcing the idea of the more humane monster sort of balance, or rather non-humane humane. You agree inside with Fabian a lot more. You talk about the more humane things you side with him, and you think a bit more like a human would. Not so much that the powers are weaker, but maybe that may be the case. Maybe the power, like, it doesn't do as much damage, but it has this effect instead. Whereas the more humane one is more bloody and visceral and just makes a lot of mess, etc. and so forth. I don't like that because that's not vampire. That's not how that works at all. Like, I get the process of learning disciplines, and everyone has like a different flair of doing that, and I think that might be what they're going for. But mechanically speaking, it feels very, there's a good path and there's a bad path, and maybe there's a secret end somewhere along the line if you do A, B, C, and D. So, again, we haven't seen any footage, or like, I'm imagining like a fucking skill tree sort of thing, but it might, I don't know, being vampire might be like a load of blood veins or whatever, and certain pathways might be locked off depending on what you're doing. I don't like that because there's not vampire, and it's also quite limiting in that sense. Sure, it will encourage replayability to make new characters and do whatnot, but at the same time, when you're playing, you're gonna get locked in a certain pathway. Because I think it will be quite difficult to change or swap over. Unless it does what Infamous did, where you can go a whole playthrough being good, and then an option to be really fucking diabolical that you cannot come back from. And then you have access to all the nasty ones, or maybe vice versa. But I don't think that's the objective here. But, you know, we'll see. But I do not like how that works. We've also haven't heard who the clans are yet.
Bully, trying to push them into a certain reaction, then that might work, that might not work, it might scare them off, something else might happen. It also depends how she looks. If she's dressed as one type of character, somebody may have a very different reaction to her compared to if she dressed like another.
Alright, so customization is kind of limited in that sense that I'm assuming different factions and people that you can speak and talk to, because we know there's like the Camarilla, the Old Prince, and then there was something else underneath, like I can't remember what it's called, like the Founders, that was it, the Founders, which has a faction within the Seattle setting here. And I'm assuming possibly with Anarch, if you're dressed like one of them, or stereotypically speaking, you know, hoodie, ripped jeans, sort of thing, as opposed to all suited and booted. So there appears to be customization thing, but it has a more mechanical theme, which is fine, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that I can't really express myself. So if I wanted to make my vampire character resemble me, whether it's someone that's smart casual, like suit jacket, a jumper, and jeans, and fucking wrecked shoes, or maybe I wouldn't maybe stand out so well in an Anarch setting, assuming that's what they're going to bring up here. And vice versa, in a more casual setting, I have like ripped hoodies that are baggy jeans, etc. That's not going to look very good in front of some Camarilla people or the Founders. Although why an Elder would dress like that, I have no idea. Or at least the Elder as presented here. Yeah, but then again, if you want to dress up like that and want to go with the Anarchs, that's absolutely no problem at all. But that's the impression that I'm getting here, that I don't like that, because you should be allowed to dress however you want. There might be like the one character here and there who makes a comment or a mission or side quest where you have to dress a certain way. That I can get behind. But I don't think you should be limited in what you should wear to determine your style of play. Because, you know, if you have a look at LA by Night, Victor Temple, stereotypical Ventrue, really, but in an Anarch setting. You know, he owns a business, a nightclub, he's all very flashy, got lots of money, as most Ventrue do, but he doesn't look like the rest of the Anarchs there. It's just, I find that a little irritating. And given the fact that we know this game's in first person, we're only going to be able to see our character when we're chasing outfit, and in like these fucking, again, Mass Effect dialogue screens with the different options, one of the really close up on the face. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to switch to third person tools. We can't even have a proper look outside of the menu. So it just seems a bit weird to me. I'd also hope that you'd be able to do different hairstyles and skin colours as well, because that would be really bad if you couldn't.
We're hinting at a system that we have in Vampire the Masquerade, resonance, which is the emotional state of dinner, essentially, of your prey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to fire sometimes what the resonance of the character she's feeding on is, and she can push that, and she can change that, or attempt it.
I hate that, purely because I hate the resonance system in V5. But as that's just explained, the emotional state of the mortal affects the state of their blood, their resonance, which basically in-game in V5, 5th edition of Vampire the Masquerade, the tabletop game, it allows, from memory, because I've always ignored this, or like gives a boost to particular disciplines or stats, I believe. And I hate that's going to be a bit of a push here, which again is which I feel may dictate towards different play styles. Like, sure, if a character wants to play that certain way, they can, but I don't feel that should be the only option. Although, I'm again just knee-jerk reaction and stuff. We haven't seen how this works properly, and I'm sure we're going to get some more gameplay either here or in future stuff. But initial knee-jerk reactions, I do not like the resonance being included here. Ugh.
Work. As I said, depends how you dress, depends who the character is, and what they feel about how you've approached them.
Players will have options to choose outfits, and
Yes.
those outfits will have a narrative and dialogue impact.
Yes, yes, that's absolutely true. People will recognize you as a different thing depending on what you're wearing.
Very, very cool. So, let us return to Seattle and another sneak peek.
Oh, got more gameplay now?
The nomad.
Willem, I take it. You had some interesting guests outside. Expecting trouble?
That depends. Why are you here?
Earlier tonight, another kindred by the name of Isabella used this mark to sap my power. Do you know anything about it?
No. All I had to do was keep my head down for just a few more nights. He's hiding something.
Tell me, Willem.
What was that? The dialogue feels very disjointed. Are we really doing this? I'm just going to have to swap from OBS to Chrome, go back a little bit.
To sap my power. Do
And the
you know anything
eyes,
about it?
they're just staring off.
No. All I had to do was keep my head down for just a few more nights. He's hiding something.
Are we really doing this? Are we going to do this whole zoom up thing when Fabian is speaking? And how does he know that? Well, Isabella, Finnblood, sapping power from the mark on the hand. Yeah, she's got Finnblood alchemy. She's got some weird fucking alchemy going on. Or blood sorcery, so I'd be surprised if the Tremere were in this. That's so cheesy. I mean, sure, they need to express it somehow, but it's just so dead looking. Like, they could have panned it out and she could have, like, made a face or something, but you know what this reminds me of? This is a very David Cage, Heavy Rain sort of reaction thing. Like, I'd expect it in a game like that or Detroit Become Human. And they didn't have that sort of thing. But this is just so bizarre. Again, the whole thin blood on the head thing. And anyway, again, regardless of the thin blood zapping thing, how does he know that he's lying? Well, it's fucking obvious that he's lying. Like, I feel that should be more a dialogue option rather than him just saying he's hiding something. That's so cheesy, man. Come on.
Tell me, Willem.
Oh, there's some
what
dialogue
rumors
options
have you
there.
heard about me?
That you were there in Cairo. They called you the Slayer.
I have been many things to many people. And what will I be to you, Willem? And to this lonely, forgotten warehouse?
You're exactly what he said you'd be. Guess that makes it easier.
Makes what easier?
What happens next?
So vampires aren't traditional.
So, the player characters from Cairo, and they're known as the Slayer, so I'm getting like a sort of Scourge or Sheriff vibe from this. But again, this doesn't feel like Bloodlines. Because, sure, you are the newbie vampire trying to discover everything as you played, but at the same time, you could come up with any sort of story, like why, to begin with, why you're in that bed with that person or whatever, and like play the game how you want and come up with your own story and ideas. This is a dedicated character that we are playing, rather than one of our own creation. Which is so disappointing. Like, I'm sure this will be a half-decent Vampire the Masquerade game, but it does not feel like Bloodlines to me. Because it's so weird and different out there. But yeah, let's carry on and see what they've got to say next.
Traditionally paragons of truth. And I think here when we're talking to Willem, we can see that Fire is more interested in pushing her agenda than necessarily being completely accurate about her biography. So what are these kinds of decisions?
Of course, she's an
mean
elder.
for the dialogue and the story arc? If you decide to tell Willem about your killer reputation versus take another route.
So this is one of the advantages of playing an elder. You have a history. You've been heard of before. Fire has this legend associated with it. There are several legends, a whole collection of legends. Which of those are true is, to a certain extent, a decision for the player. We're leaving that deliberately Was she at this particular incident? Did she cause the incident? Was she escaping the incident? And the variety of different background choices which we feed into it, a little bit like the way that Commander Shepard in Mass Effect has a series of background choices. Although
Again, the Mass Effect references here. Because even with the Shepard or any game like that, and with V, like, they were an open slate. Sure, they had this reputation about this, like, command, they've slain aliens and whatnot, but you can, like, do whatever you want there. This character, as he said, has got a bit of a history you're known of. This doesn't feel like Shepard here, because you can mould the Shepard into what you want to be, rather than, and you forge those legends rather than this one here. You have these legends associated with you, and you can just either come up, watch one, takes your fancy more, and just bullshit your way through all of them. I don't know how well I'm explaining that, but there is a huge... This doesn't feel like a Commander Shepard or V from Cyberpunk sort of thing here. This feels like you are playing this... Okay, so the idea of them being the thin blood that's diabolized the Elder doesn't quite work here, because they are a known figure. I feel they've missed a mark there, honestly, with this, with how they've set this story up.
But that means that when she approaches people in Seattle, they may have heard of her, and they may have some idea what she did, and that can be a scary legend, or it can give you a bit more nuance to it. I like to think of her as the Wild West movies where the gunslinger comes to town, who people know the reputation, and that makes them approach things in a very different way when they suddenly realize who they're up against. And that is the weightiness of the character we're dumping into Seattle's society. So the background, this unreliable narration, as you said, it's left for the player to hint at, but the decisions that the player makes about Fire's background will be reflected by other characters in the game, and that might affect them differently if they have a particular opinion about that.
I mean, it's very interesting.
I'm also going to make an assumption here that the way that you choose the options, like, if you the player wanting to assume this Slayer persona, legend of them to be true, it might gear towards certain conversations with Fabian, and it could also direct you towards certain outcomes in the story, like how certain missions approach, how obviously it will affect how you will go at some missions, like you're the killer, you're going to be this killer going around hacking and slashing at things that's forced to be reckoned with. It might determine some mission outcomes, like in a mechanical sense, because you chose that rather than how you play that, which is interesting. And the Wild West sort of things is interesting as well, because again, I don't think it's quite married up with what they're going for, especially with the constant Mass Effect comparisons. Because again, those Wild West, like, stranger comes into town sort of things, like, there is an air of mystery around them, and you spend the movie like learning about them, trying to work out what's going on, or just seeing how bloody talented and scary they are. Alternatively, you look at Mass Effect, as I said a moment ago. Yeah, it starts off with like him or she, or them, having some reputation. But again, through the 3 games, as Shepard, you forge those stories and you have a greater reputation. Those are your stories that you build, with only just a little sliver to hold on at the beginning, which sort of propels everything forward. This isn't here. You have all of this, and you can just bullshit your way to that. And that doesn't really hit as well as me in a more, compared to a more traditional role-playing sense. Which is the weird juxtaposition of playing an Elder in Vampire, which I should mention isn't a very Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition thing, because in the tabletop game you can't play as Elders. You can play as fledglings who've just popped out of the vampiric womb, as it were. You can play as a neonate who's been around for about 50 years, or you can play as an Ancillor who's been around for like 100-ish years, like 125 years, who have some knowledge but not as much of experience as Elders would. But one of the biggest points of annoyed people with the 5th edition stuff is that you can't play as Elders, and older editions vampires could. And that's a power gaming thing, because, as he said, as I will say, as everyone will tell you, the vast majority of people play vampire, they are neonates, they are nobodies, and they work their way up. But the fact that that option is there And 5th edition doesn't have that. And again, it's focused more on the humanity side of things. But they're doing it, trying to discuss that here in a very weird way with him in the mind sort of thing. Which, as we saw a moment ago, gives him a bullshit detector. And I wonder if that's actually tied to certain stats or upgrades that you can get. I'd be surprised if it was, to be honest, but we'll see. I didn't get the impression that it's a mechanical thing, it's just something that happens.
Referring to the gunslinger coming to town, the legend is built because of distance in those kinds of scenarios. The stories don't reach each town accurately. Here you're playing with time. If you're hundreds of years old, there's very few people that can confirm or deny what you've done. And so as you make these decisions, as we move towards the end of the game, will they come together to produce different endings?
Yes, I think it's fair to say that the choices you make for characters, the way that you portray fire, the way that you behave around other people, the story ends in different ways. And obviously I don't want to spoiler any of those. But the way that you affect Seattle long term and what will become of some of the characters, if you left them alive, because you might not, will change the story of Seattle going on from that point.
I did say that there'd be sneak peeks. They did say there'd be previews. So I will say, in Vampire the Masquerade, there are things that are much worse than death. And in this game, there will be those options. I have to ask, can players expect a yellow taxi?
Oh, we're more about Uber these days. But
I can't help I feel that was a weird attempt at humour that just didn't sit with me. As a local thing, support your local taxi firms. Don't buy into Uber unless you absolutely have to.
you don't get a lot of taxis around in Seattle that are yellow in the middle of a snowstorm, but let's wait and see.
Well, there's been a coffin full of reveals this evening. And very, very soon, we will be back revealing the playable clans in Bloodlines 2. Very happy you could join me tonight, Ian. Very happy to be able to give this information to the community. Any last words?
I just want to say that at the Chinese Room, we're really looking forward to you meeting our characters, spending a bit of time with them, and seeing how your story develops in Seattle.
All right, and that's the end of that. Yeah. I'm not excited. Like, as I said earlier on, I don't have a PS5. The laptop that I would play games off of if I ever played any PC games, I don't think is going to be tough enough. It can barely chug along with OBS at the moment. But this doesn't make me feel excited to pick up a PS5 as soon as possible so I can play this next year. This doesn't feel like a sequel to Bloodlines 2, which I've always found was a bit difficult because it's not in the same place with a different choice of characters. Even when it had the same writer, Brian Mitsuda, doing it, it's a bit difficult to convey that sequel as a spiritual successor. Yes. But not a sequel, and it's holding on to the name Bloodlines 2 to sell it to the masses. Some of the ideas they presented there I feel a bit iffy about, as I've expressed, and I'm just checking something as I'm trying to collect my thoughts together. To have a look at the bio. The successor to the RPG Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Okay. So it doesn't call itself a sequel. It does actually call itself the successor of, which is an interesting wording choice. They could have changed the name of this, but again, if this didn't have the name Bloodlines 2, it would just be another Vampire the Masquerade video game, and it wouldn't be receiving this much attention. This is going to be the make or break deal with Paradox, and I suppose if I'm being totally fair, based on this alone and what we've seen, it looks okay. which is really the best I can say with any Vampire the Masquerade video game at the moment. I feel very iffy about the whole Finnblood connection, partly because I don't like the Finnbloods. I don't like the way that it's been handled in that. Yeah, it makes sense that they're using that example as the more humane stuff of how getting about. They could have done it as an actual character that comes up and about, tied it to the narrative in a physical sense rather than this supernatural meta sense. The idea that I presented earlier on that maybe the sigil is like keeping her, well, capping off her power. I have seen that done before on an actual play, although I was a bit more engaged with it there. Whereas here, they're using the Finnblood. Again, in the reverse, originally Finnblood up to vampire, now you've got elder Finnblood in them. As I said, it looks good. All the other characters look good apart from the female representation of fire. The Slayer from Cairo, whose the voice acting here is noticeably lesser than the other two that we saw, Willem and Lou. They're more animated in their face, although Willem, clearly that's a Nosferatu. So we can get rid of that character option for as a player can. I'd be very surprised if we would be allowed to play as a Nosferatu from the get-go, which is upsetting. And the fact that we are implying to get revealing the player clan is that, to me, it's implying that we're not going to get all the ones in V5, and if we do, they'll probably come up as DLC, like, years down the road, which is disappointing. Clans, I would have thought, I don't think it will be Tremere because of the whole, from what I was saying earlier on, I'd be very surprised if it was Tremere. I'd imagine it would be some of the more ones to easily stereotype, to put in those Mass Effect ways of playing, to use it like that. We're probably going to get Bruhar, Toreador, Ventru. I'd be surprised if we get Malkavian, because Malkavian reasons. It's not going to be weird and kooky like it was in Bloodlines 1. In fact, if it was a Malkavian here, that the Finnblood and the Head Fiend would make a lot more sense. A mad quirk of the Malkavian, so to speak. I don't think it would be... It could be... Banu Hakim could be an option, as the Assamites in traditional vampire lore had a decent foothold in Cairo. But it's difficult to tell. Really, like, I don't think we're going to get La Sombra. I don't think we're going to get Hecata. Probably not going to get Tzimisce. Definitely not Salubri or Ravno. Definitely not Ravnos. So yeah, I imagine it would just be the basic Bruhar, Toreador, Ventrue, Gangrel. Maybe. I would also be interested to see how the different clans options would affect dialogue or whatever. But as it stands at the moment, I am not particularly impressed with this. I'm not very excited by it. Again, regarding with how it looks fine. Remember that this is post-alpha footage as it was labelled, so there is lots of work to be done. We've got a whole year's worth of development in the way. But I can understand why people are annoyed with this, because, as I said, this doesn't feel like a sequel to Bloodlines. Okay, on its Twitter page, it marks itself as a successor to Bloodlines, but it doesn't really justify using Bloodlines 2 as the name. Because one of the last trades we saw with Hydesud Labs is that Damsel was going to be a character in this. I would be interested to see if that's still the case here. So at least then you could call it then, but even then that felt like a weird Easter egg. But the fact that she was in a trailer meant it was a bit more important, but I don't see that being the case here. I could be wrong. I'd find that very hard to believe, but I'll give credit where it's due, though. It certainly looks a lot nicer than the final bits of footage we saw from Hardsuit Labs' Bloodlines. Although the original trailers and original footage that we saw from them did look a lot nicer. So really the main gripes with me is that they're trying to emulate a sort of Mass Effect thing because they're using Mass Effect terminologies for playstyles. They refer to Shepard, the connection to the Wild West, which I guess does link back in some weird way. So this feels like an adventure game with more RPG elements rather than a traditional role-playing game. Although you could argue it's very much a role-playing game because you are role-playing a character. But it's not a character of your own creation. Even with Bloodlines 1, you couldn't do much with it. the clothes you could wear had like buffs and debuffs in some senses. And there was a whole character sheet there. I'd be curious to see actually if they employ that here at all, although I'd be very surprised if they do. It's a bit old hack in a video game term, but we'll see. We'll find out. We're going to get more gameplay footage as well. But yeah, I'm not really all that excited for this, and as I said, I can understand why people are annoyed about that. Especially from what we've seen, it seems to be very action-focused. It does... The action... Yeah, it just seems very action-focused. There's some options there. There's going to be different endings and whatnot. I don't like the fact that resonance is used. It just looks okay. Which is quite disappointing, really. And I know that people are going to have more visceral reactions to mine, but I've just gone beyond the point of caring. And if for whatever reason the Chinese room do end up watch this, because I know there's some people in World of Darkness HQ that watch my stuff, this might get shared around with the Chinese room. I do appreciate the fact that you're taking risks and doing things different. Like, don't get me wrong, they're interesting ideas, I just don't personally like them. And also, I feel kind of cool that someone's British doing it because, in case you haven't worked out, I'm British in it. And I do love the Chinese room stuff, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to love everything that you do. And who knows, this may go out of date within a few months by now. The fans may make the Chinese room, change things, and there may be delays, which I wouldn't be surprised with at all. But we'll see. So I hope this has been somewhat entertaining for everybody. Or at the very least interesting. We've been at this for about 57 minutes now. And if I just carry on talking, I'm just going to end up waffling. So until next time, farewell.